Hello, thank you for joining us today for AWWA's webinar, Steps for Helping Utilities Validate Their Lead Service Line Inventory, presented by Mueller. I'm Emily Burdett with AWWA, and I will be your moderator today. Now, while we wait for everyone to join, we have a couple poll questions. This first poll asks, do you understand your state's requirements for developing and maintaining service line inventories? Answer A, not at all, awaiting further guidance from the state. B, I'm aware of it. C, I've seen it, but don't understand it. D, understand it, but have questions. And E, I'm an expert. So please go ahead and give us your feedback if you do understand your state's requirements for developing and maintaining service line inventories. We would love to know, both Mueller and AWWA. And of course, we'll give you a beat to keep answering, and then we'll be able to move forward. All right, thank you for your answers there. It looks like 10% of our audience is not at all awaiting further guidance from the state. 35% of the audience is aware. 7% of the audience answered, I've seen it but don't understand it. 43% of the audience understands it but have questions, and 5% are experts. That is a great start. Thank you so much. Let's ask a second question since we have you all and find out where we're at. We want to ask, where are you in the process of your lead service inventory? So go ahead and let us know if you're A, in the planning phase and are preparing project plan, B, review of historical records, C, desktop analysis, D, field validation of records or desktop analysis, or E, ready for submission. So please go ahead and let us know where you are in the process of your lead service inventory. As we start talking about this today, we'd love to know where you are at. And of course, we'll give you a beat to answer and let us know where you are among those 5 steps. All right, a few more moments and let's look at the answers. So we have 40% of our audience when asked, where are you in the process of your lead service inventory, saying the planning phase, preparing the project plan. 21% of you are reviewing historical records. 9% are in desktop analysis. 27% in field validation of records or desktop analysis, and 3% are ready for submission. That is great information for us and our presenters today. We can go ahead and get started. Thank you for those responses, but before we get into the presentations, I do have to give you some tips to enhance your webinar experience since we have a lot of you here today. We recommend you close email, instant messengers, and any other programs not currently in use, as they may interfere with the smooth reception of the webinar, causing buffering and poor sound quality. Technical assistance can be found in the GoToWebinar technical support page at the link listed in your handouts and on the slideshow. I also need to inform you that the mention of specific products or services in this webinar does not represent AWWA endorsement. AWWA does not endorse or approve products or services. Now we'll hold an audience Q&A at the end of the webinar, but you can submit questions to the panel anytime using the question pane at the lower right of your browser. And we'll try our best to answer as many of your questions as we can, and any remaining questions will be recorded and shared with the panelists. Now, I am pleased to introduce our distinguished panel of experts. Dave Johnson. Dave is the Director of Smart Infrastructure at Mueller Water Products. He leads the digital development strategy for Mueller's technology portfolio. Dave has been in the water industry for over 15 years. He has worked with numerous utilities around the world with experience in both development and deployment of new technologies. And also we have Richard Brandt. Richard is the green recovery subject matter expert at Severn Trent Water. He has worked with them for over 17 years, starting as an apprentice, working in R&M on the dig gang things. And now Richard has progressed through several roles, including senior tech, R&M manager, project delivery lead, and currently holds the role of subject matter expert, where he leads innovation, concentrating on the lead replacement supply pipes program. So with that, I'm going to pass things off to our panelists. Take it away, gentlemen.
Yes, thank you very much, Emily. And as I bring up my screen here, I will just set this up a little bit. So today I'm very thrilled to unveil a new technology that will help water utilities, and let me get my video on too, that is targeted to help water utilities develop their lead service line inventory, which is going to result in a more accurate and more efficient replacement program. And so we're going to start today's presentation with one of our utility partners, Severn Trent Water. They are based in the UK. They serve around 4.5 million households and businesses. They were the very first adopter of this new lead service line screening solution. And so, that being said, I want to quickly hand it over to Richard so he can go over the program that they have at Severn Trent Water. And then following that, we will introduce the technology itself. So Emily, thank you. And Richard, you can take it away.
Hi there, I'm Rich Brandt. I say I've already been introduced as the great SME for Severn Trent, and I'm just going to talk to you about our programme and why we're doing it. At the beginning of the AMP in the UK, we have asset management plans, and they run for 5 years. We start off looking at all different ways we can improve the network, and one of the programs we did was the Taking Care of Supply Pipes program. I've got a slide next, I think, which will give you a bit more detail. This is a breakdown of how many supply pipes we're going to do. So in the UK, it breaks down into 3 parts of the pipe. So you have the communication pipe, which is from the main, the ferrule, up to the boundary line of the customer's property, the supply pipe, which is from the boundary into the customer's property, and then we call it an overall service pipe, which is both of them added together. So for many years, we've obviously been replacing com pipes, doing repairs on them, changing out lead, but this program was to replace everything all the way from the ferrule up to the compliance tap inside the customer's property. AWWA, who is our overall governing body, gave us £87 million to do this program, and said we have to do 25,000 supply pipes in the Coventry area and 1,000 in Shropshire, which is a much more rural area. And I'll go into why that split is and the differences and why we're doing it. So the AMP is currently going to run until March 31st, 2025, and that's the time we were given to do it all. So there's a project funding there and the kind of like breakdown of what we were given. We were looking at different installation methods, because usually, say, when we work on the public side of things, we can do what we like. We can go in, put a traffic management, as long as we keep the customer informed about what we're doing, it doesn't really affect them massively. But now, of course, we're having to come onto their private property. We're having to excavate on their driveways, in their gardens, in the back, around the back of their houses. So it's much more like bigger engagement piece. Then we looked at different installation requirements. We needed to way we installed them and how we recorded them, especially. We looked at different ways we could record exactly where the pipes were going. Currently, we use a GIS system which records all our mains and every asset attached to those, but we don't have anything that records any service or supply pipes. So without going into too much detail, we also looked at that and recording the way we do it. We also wanted to install a meter on every supply pipe that we installed as well. Although we wouldn't force the customer to build on that, it just added an assurance piece, and we could monitor any leakage in the future. It is quite tricky having to do the entire piece of going into the customer's pipe, because originally on lesser pipes, they would just tunnel them underneath the foundations, bring them up into the kitchen usually, and the supply pipe would be there. So it was not always easy to just excavate, because we couldn't go inside people's kitchens and just tear their floor up. The reporting processes of it, and which AWWA has asked us to do. So we had to look at the different number of supply pipes we were going to do. So split services. So in the UK, we have a lot of shared supply pipes. So we'll have terraced houses, which will have a single pipe going down the side of the house, and that'll tee off onto 4, 6 And weirdly, we've even come across a supply pipe which feeds 31 properties. All this stuff then we needed to report on, then had to be put into the PR24, which will be the next AMP8, and then to see how we follow on forward into the future with it. Moving on to our key outcomes, really, the innovation piece, which is what I was strongly involved in, is more of what the technologies we're going to use, how we're going to investigate where the lead was, and how would we replace it. So some of the communication engagement objectives we had was really signing up these customers, because we didn't want to go out there and say you've got lead, it's really dangerous. We wanted to kind of be a more softly approach, saying that these are the benefits of the scheme we're going to do. It's not going to cost you any money at all. Lead is obviously has been proven to be not great essentially for you, but we didn't want to say it's dangerous, we need to get rid of it straight away, because the Severn Trent area is much bigger than just the Coventry or Shropshire piece. So we didn't want to then get other areas suddenly saying, why aren't you replacing our one? So a lot of the customers also don't know that they're responsible for the supply pipe on their land as well. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword, where you're having to explain to them that we want to replace the pipe, it's your responsibility, but we want to do it for free. So there's that kind of high-level disruption that the customer will then have to face. We also then want to do it only makes cost-effective sense to do it in blocks. So we want to do roads at a time. We don't want to go in and out of roads doing 2 or 3, going to somewhere else, coming back again, as we're putting up traffic management, things like that, having to pay the council for the fees. We want to try and do it as cost effectively as possible and quickly as well, and as least disruption to the customer. There's also very mixed demographics within the area we're looking at. There's quite a high percentage of poverty, but equally there's quite also equally there's houses that are much more better off. We were also looking at the legal requirements, because in the UK, if somebody wants to have their lead replacement done, it is a legal requirement that we have to do that for them. But equally, we can't force anybody to do it. So when you're looking at joint supplies, this makes things quite tricky. I could go into more detail about how we've worked around that, but that's probably an hour conversation on its own. The way we dealt with speaking to customers with the digital and social way of doing things was we were much more prevalent on social media. So we did Facebook, Instagram, I believe we even got a TikTok account, and going out into the communities, we were finding places where a lot of the community gathered, in churches, community halls, and that's how we were kind of going out there and reaching people. We also send letters as well out to all individual addresses, saying these are the possibility of we can replace your lead pipes if you want to contact us. And then we were getting inspectors to go out, check the property, see how easy the supply pipes could be replaced, because it wasn't always that easy. There was a lot of work involved in planning them out and figuring out how we were going to do the new connections, because we wanted to take everybody off joint supplies onto single supplies as well. So we're drilling and tapping mains and working out where those supply pipes would go. We did a lot of filming work as well, just to kind of give an end-to-end process view of how people could click onto links on our website to say, this is what we'd expect. These are the people that are going to come out. This is how long the work will take. We had some really positive responses, especially with the social media. Most people have engaged with us through that, and it's very easy to spread the word around. And the digital format works really well, because people can, click, copy, share, paste links. It makes it so much easier. And really, that side of it worked really well. The obstacles that we found were mainly the joint supplies. And I say, originally when we did some scouting equations to go and look at the properties, it was thought to be oh, sorry, is there something up on the screen now?
Yeah, quick pause. I think we're going to do a poll here.
Sorry. Carry on with that one.
Just to make sure our audience knows the question and answers verbally as well as on screen. What are your barriers to validating your lead inventory, or when selecting a validation solution? Answer A is I don't know where to start. B, I don't have the manpower. C, I am concerned about or having difficulty with customer rel. D, I don't know how or have difficulty accessing funding, or E, other. So those are the choices in front of you on screen as we quickly pause for this poll. And go ahead and let us know, and I will let our audience know the splits when we see our answers. So we'll give you a few more beats, as always, to get that answer in. And these are our answers. So 18% of the audience is I don't know where to start for what barriers to validating your lead inventory or when selecting a validation solution. 38% don't have the manpower. 16% answered I am concerned about or have difficulty with customer rel or REL. Apologies on pronunciation there. 11% answered I don't know how or have difficulty accessing funding. And then 17% are experiencing other issues outside of those four. So as we continue on, thank you for those answers, and Richard will continue.
I would briefly touch on that about the manpower situation. That's exactly the same thing we found in the UK. We have this network rail thing called a HS2, which is taking a lot of manpower from all over the utilities, and it really has stretched us on the ability to find people to do the work itself. So I think it's a universal issue of finding a skilled workforce to be able to carry out this stuff. But yeah, going on the obstacles to date, what I say the biggest issue, which I touched on earlier, was the joint supply scenarios. In the UK, we have typically terraced houses, which can be ranged from anything from 4 all the way up to, as I mentioned earlier, 31 properties, and the services are briefly overlined. You know, some of the options there where the pipe would come up round the back of the houses, teed off. And these could have been built back in the 1940s, and essentially then you have build overs, so people could have built extensions, conservatories, all those kind of things that go over the back, and then you end up with the pipe underneath the property that then you can't disconnect. So the only way to do a full-blown replacement would be to get everybody signed up, replace all the disconnect the lead pipe at the main, and then do all brand new services and connect them in. But then equally, you'd have to put a new point of entry in, because the old point of entry would have been underneath the build overs. When they did the first scoping for this, they thought it would be 20% joint supplies to 80% singles, and that was completely flipped on its head. It ended up being 80% joint supplies and 20% singles, which made our work a lot harder. That was based in Coventry, built-up areas, that kind of thing. When you go more rural, and I'll talk the Shropshire one, yeah, it goes out to much bigger single supplies, but then equally you have very long driveways. You know, we're finding some that were like a mile and a half long, and they had this single supply pipe going all the way to farm properties. The reason why we did pick Shropshire as well for the 1,000 was it's just fed up one reservoir. It's a borehole that's then pumped into a reservoir and splits into 3 DMAs, district metered areas, which we use. And if we could replace every single lead pipe within that area, it would mean we could turn off the phosphorus dosing, which would be a massive cost saving. I think it's like £1.2 million per year, because you have to put in the phosphor at the start, and then you have to remove it before you pump it back out into the rivers as well. I say we're finding that with the joint supplies, that you not being able to sign up all the customers together. If you have an issue with one customer doesn't want to sign up, and we were finding this because maybe somebody, even neighbours, just don't like each other, and they would put the stop on it just to upset their other customer, or there would be issues. Maybe so they just didn't want it. They didn't want the stress in their life. They didn't want the hassle. We're finding that with a lot more of the elderly customers. You know, typically demographics, anybody in their 70s, 80s, they just didn't feel safe, or didn't want to have anybody working there, which we have to totally, you know, work around, and that's why we looked at our dead leg process as well. But I said that's probably another hour talk I could spend. So moving on to I think there's a next slide along. Yeah, so that's just covering off and the access to required to cut off other services. It is very tricky. I think on the next slide you've got common photographs of some of the issues we found. I think. Yeah, no, oh, all the photos, no photos there. So really, the we have access issues with the pipes, the way they come into the properties in the UK as well. They're usually in kitchens, behind cupboards, behind washing machines, dishwashers, that kind of thing, and it's quite hard to get onto the stop taps. Usually there's just a hole big enough cut so you can get your hand onto it, and this kind of like touches onto why we started speaking to Mueller about how we could define what the material types were, because sometimes you could just see the tap and you couldn't even see the pipe material coming up from the floor. So when we started using them, we could very easily get the sensor onto the internal stop tap and the external stop tap, which was great. So we didn't need to see the pipe itself, as long as we knew the length and the route that we were using. It was very simple. This is a 20-minute process. It's completely non-invasive. The customers were quite happy with the time we would be doing there. Sometimes we needed to pull the washing machine or dishwasher out, but it was very easy to put it back again. So yeah, that's the kind of main success. You don't need a lot of access to be able to get these sensors on. I think it's really good. We've had some good, tremendous success with it at all. I said that last slide, just picking up on where our program moving into the future was B2. When we do complete mains renewals of DMAs, which is what we do anyway, we would then be looking to do the service pipes or the supply pipes all together at the same time. So we'd replace the main, the comm pipe, and the supply pipe into the customer's property. So that's probably the best way around it, cost-wise, efficiency. It makes total sense. I think that's about everything.
Thank you very much, Richard. And that's going to lead us into a deeper description about the lead service screening technology that Mueller has, which you've incorporated into your program at Severn Trent now. And so thank you for that overview of what you guys are up to. Now, let's before I get into it, we're going to start with one more poll. The question is, when do you plan to start field validation of your lead service inventory? And the options are A, I'm done, B, I've started, C, in the next 1 to 6 months, D, in the next 6 to 9 months, or E, in the next 12 plus months. And so we'll give everybody some time to answer those questions. Then Emily, you just let us know when we can close the poll.
Sure, Dave. Yeah, we're going to give just a beat more, make sure everyone can answer one of those 5 selections. And then we'll be able to see the split of our audience.
Excellent. Okay, and yeah, I can read off the results here. And so we got 4% that say I'm done. 37% say I've started. 33% will be starting in the next 1 to 6 months, 15% in the next 6 to 9 months, and 11 in the next 12 plus months. Yeah, so a little bit more of an even distribution or normal distribution on that answer compared to the previous one. So thank you very much for those answers. Now to shift gears a little bit to North America and to the technology that we're bringing to the table here. And so we all know in North America that the EPA is driving the need for utilities to get a hold of their service line inventories. And so there is a requirement, the lead and copper rule revisions published in 2021, which basically state by October 2024 that inventories of all the utilities need to be submitted to the state regulatory bodies. And so that shouldn't be news to anybody. I think we've all seen that coming for a while now. But to level set on definitions and just what this all means, I think it's important because excuse me, there's a lot of different types of fittings and pipes that are involved here. And so we've got lead pipe as obviously what we're trying to find and pull out of the system. But as part of these requirements, we are also looking for galvanized that's required to be replaced. And so galvanized pipe that's either associated with an an unknown lead service, or if it's downstream from a known lead service, it also has to be, it's also required to be replaced. If it's an unknown pipe and there's a chance that it's lead, it's required to be replaced. And so if you don't have any proof of record that it's a material other than lead, then that is essentially classified as lead. And then the last classification is non-lead. So you need to provide some sort of proof that it is non-lead, that it's, you know, plastic or copper or something else. And, you know, it's obviously too hard to read on the screen there, and the definitions are, you know, a little bit more specific than what I had described to you there. But it's very important that we level set on what those definitions are in North America, because everybody's working towards the same thing. Now, the program overall is you know, has been sort of recommended at the national level. The Mueller lead service line solution that we're offering up here is really purpose-built for utilities that are developing their inventory. Most, if not all, utilities are following this national guideline that specify this process to build the inventory and then to improve on it. And that you know, is sort of depicted here, but overall the idea is to start with a historical records review. And so gather the information, go through the filing cabinets that are in the basements of the utility offices, bring up the as-built drawings, bring up old contractor records, bring up tap cards, and try to compile that into some sort of centralized database where you can then stand back and do a bit of a desktop analysis to see what you have and what you know about your inventory. But then the next step is to validate and investigate basically the accuracy of all that information that you gather. And so I would fathom a guess that nobody's got 100% complete historical records. So there's always going to be gaps in that information that you pull together. And then there's always going to be questions about how accurate that information is. So the states and the EPA are requiring that you go and do field validations to go through this continuous improvement process to make sure that what your records say match what's in the field, and to bring that up to sort of a certain level of certainty that you know where all your lead pipe is. And so this tool, this screening tool that we're talking about today, is really fits right into that category of continuous improvement and field investigations. It's really aiming for the services which are completely unknown, the services where there's uncertainty in the results, or the services where, you know, you need to do some validation on records from, I'll call it like a statistical process control perspective, but that's a little bit too wordy. It's a validation. It's meant to validate the historical records that you are pulling together. Now, the tool itself, where it shines is on the customer side of the service. So that's in between the curb stop and the meter in the house in some scenarios, or in between the curb stop or in between the meter and the curb stop in some scenarios as well, or sorry, in between the meter and where it comes up in the house. And so this is typically part of your inventory which has the most unknowns associated with it. Most of the utilities that we've spoken to at Mueller, they have the least information on the customer side of the service, the part of the service that the customer is responsible for. And so this tool is purpose-built to try to discover and find what materials those customer side services are made of. The way that it works is it's an acoustic-based technology. It is completely non-destructive, non-intrusive, and you don't need to affect the operation of the pipe whatsoever. You can leave the service on. It is a very low impact methodology to deploy in the field. We what you do is you attach two sensors to fittings in the field, and those sensor attachments are generally what's depicted here is at the curb stop and at Richard was calling it the stop tap, but it's really at the meter or at sort of the shutoff valve just inside the foundation of the home. And then what we do is we record the acoustic properties of that pipeline, and from those acoustic properties and those characteristics from that recording, we can determine what type of pipe it is. And so right now, the way the technology works is we can classify this pipe as lead, as not lead, or as plastic. So those are sort of the three main classification categories. And again, we feel that sort of fits perfectly into this inventory requirement that the EPA has put out. This is meant to be a very fast tool to be deployed either by one of your service teams at the utility or by a contractor partner. You know, we're expecting a sort of 30-minute per test type of time that you need at a per house basis, you know, it's something that can be deployed and, you know, sort of moved across your system quite quickly. Now, what we worked on with Richard in Severn Trent was building our validation database. And so it's important to know that this technology is something that's quite early in the life cycle. It's actually classified by the EPA as, what's the term I'm looking for again? As an emerging technology. And so we are continuing to build our validation database, and as we bring this tool to North America, that's what we would like to work on with you and the utilities here. So Richard was talking about sensor connection points. I mentioned that there are a requirement for 2 sensor connections, and I'm going to show some examples of where those sensor connection points are now. And so on the first image here, we've got sensor 1 sort of direct connected to the meter. We use a custom tool, a clamp, to attach it to the meter there. Sensor 2, that is an internal supply line where we've attached it to. And so again, sort of quite easy to attach that sensor. And then another couple examples, there's the external stop tap example. So you find that external stop tap, you should be able to attach directly. And then on the right, we've got another example of an internal supply line. Now, I think we want to go to Q&A because we suspect that we're going to get a lot of questions here. Before we get that, I'll just sort of wrap this up. This is, again, it's a completely non-destructive and non-intrusive technology. It's something we're quite excited about at Mueller. You know, we'd like to thank you for taking the time today to be here with us today. And we've got our contact information up here, but currently we are engaging with interested customers and utilities that are looking for ways to improve their lead service line inventory program. So if you're interested in learning more about this technology and you want to incorporate it into your program, please reach out to us at the contact information provided on this slide. And then also please visit us at ACE 2023 in booth 1303. I will be there along with some other subject matter experts that can talk to this technology and how we might use it in your program. So with that, I want to open it up for Q&A. We intentionally left a lot of time for Q&A here. So Emily, I think I hand it back to you at this point.
That's correct. I do have some questions coming in that I'd love to ask you on behalf of our audience. So I'll return to some of our earlier questions that came in and we can start working through. But I think the very first thing I want to ask you is just, has the technology been used and trialed in the States? Your own technology, what is the market at large looking like? Could you speak towards that?
Yeah, so we have done some small trials in the States to date, and as I mentioned, we're continuing to look to grow our validation database. It's really important to Mueller to make sure that we have a validation database that shows that when the technology says it's lead, it is in fact lead. So we've done a small handful of trials. I think we've just a few of them, but we are looking to continue to grow it. And but to date, we have been successful on the trials we've done in the States so far.
Understood. And some of our early questions, since we were looking internationally at the UK and then here in North America, to kind of set that ground again, one of our questions from Andrea was, it was mentioned that community members are responsible for the service lines, but aren't water providers now becoming responsible for them? Or what exactly are community members still responsible for? So if we could speak again toward, and we do have an international audience here, taking on a host of problems around the world, but where are we looking in the UK versus in the US in that community member responsibility?
I'll go with that. Well, so in the UK, everybody is responsible from their supply pipe from the boundary of their property where the footway, driveway meets, and then everything of that pipe work into their own property. I know that may be different elsewhere in the world, but yeah, so literally where your footpath or even the road, if you live directly on the road, where that boundary line is, that's where it starts. So usually we put a boundary box in there for that particular thing, where you find a stop tap. Everything off the outlet of that into your house is your responsibility.
Anything to add?
Yeah, and I think I'm not very knowledgeable about this. I think this changes, state by state on the U.S. side. I have heard of some municipalities, though, changing bylaws and moving the responsibility of the private side service to the utility itself for this very reason. I think that's a small sample set of examples where, most of the time in the U.S. it's similar to what Richard had described.
And Richard, since we can ask you another question while you're here, we did have Rebecca asking, in the UK, do lead connectors, goosenecks have to be replaced, or just the service line pipes? Just another clarification there. Yeah,
so the way we're doing it, we replace all of the lead. This is part of our program, though. I say, so when you're doing just a comp pipe renewal, say this is outside of the area of the scope we're working in. So if you're within the Coventry area, if you're in the UK, this might mean something to you. If you're in the CV1 to CV6 postcode area, well, that's the program we're doing, and we're replacing that all for free. If we, as a Severn Trent, are just replacing the comp pipe, which is just the pipe from the main to the boundary line, that then we replace all of that lead with plastic MDPE 25mm usually, and then install a boundary box. So yeah, we don't just go in and just replace a bit of it. We replace all of it. But then that is the customer's responsibility then to replace their pipe. It's not forced upon them. We don't ask them. And if somebody wants to replace their supply pipe off from lead, we will then do that free connection and replace all of it for free as well on the public side, so they would only have to pay for the pipe that's on their land.
Thank you, Richard. That makes sense.
I mean, I'll just add a little bit to that as well. Just say we replace all the fittings. So if there's any fittings that might have particles of lead in them as well, we replace those. So there's literally, we don't leave anything in that may contain traces of lead.
Noted. Well, since we were looking at the technology, as we led into that, one of our first questions from Sean was, the utility has iron service lines. How can it be determined whether they're lead lined or not? Would any iron service that isn't investigated be considered unknown status until it is?
Yeah, I can answer that one. And so today, the technology classifies services and as lead, not lead, or plastic. The lead lining question is one that we still have to answer, and we're still doing field validations on. And so time will tell. The more validations that we get, the more information we'll have on whether or not we can actually find lead lined services, iron services with lead lining in it.
We appreciate you for taking on that hurdle. Let's see. We also have more specifications, more clarifications from Michael here. Is there any way to classify a public owned service if the only thing is a gooseneck between the main and the meter? They continue, the main is 6 inches from the meter. By the definition, a gooseneck is in its own thing and doesn't constitute a service line. So in this case, would the service line be only the customer side? Calling a 1-foot gooseneck a utility-owned service line seems to mislabel the intent of the rule. So obviously drilling down into some specifics here, but is there a high-level answer you could give us in this moment?
Yeah, I think I catch the intent of the question there. So the way this technology works, it needs 2 sensor connection points, and it's designed to identify the predominant pipe material between those 2 sensor connection points. So it does not identify goosenecks. It does not identify lead solder joints, for example. And that's why we are, offering it up as something that works on the customer side service. We've done some investigations on the utility side service, and they have not proved to be easy yet. So again, something that we're working on, but today we know that we've been quite successful on the customer side service. So that's why we're showing it as is.
I think perhaps another involved answer, but just so we touch on this, Steve brought up how to address slab construction. Is that a kind of technical, or could we speak high level to that as well?
It is a bit technical, but I'll try to give my best answer here. So we need a sensor connection point inside or very near to where the service enters the home. And so to date, we've done a lot of testing, had a lot of success connecting to the pipe right when it comes into the foundation of the home or very close to it. With a slab pour, that creates a difficulty in actually finding where that service is and getting it close to the home. And so again, I don't think we've tested a slab pour yet, but I will say, the requirement is that we have a sensor close to the foundation. On the inside or the outside would work fine.
And I think these questions are speaking to what you said earlier, Dave, about there's the least information on the customer side. So addressing those questions is the hurdle we're all facing. Moving on, we have some more questions coming in. I'm going to keep firing away. We have Carmi asking, what about fire hydrants that have lead packed to ports that could leach back into the system?
Yeah, that one's easy. No, this technology is not designed to find the lead in fire hydrants.
That's fair enough. Carrie followed up with, are we really required to gather historical data? Would field validation on utility side materials suffice?
That's a good question. That would be for your state regulator to answer more precisely. But in the absence of any historical information, then I'm sure there will be a requirement for a significant number of field validations.
To touch on that with the UK as well, AWWA do require us to record lead services where we find them as well. So if we find them, we know where to replace them in the future.
Now, I'll remind our audience that we will be passing off your questions to our presenters today, and they should be able to get back to you in some instances for some of the questions. So we do have some more technical abilities of the validation tool. For the moment, though, I'd like to ask a more high-level question and see if we'll return to the technical questions. Just on the high level, has this been accepted as a validation technique? Asked Howard.
Accepted by whom would be my response question. But if you're asking if it's been accepted by state regulators, the short answer is no. But our understanding with state regulators is that they are looking for utilities to be due diligent in their inventory practices. And so, you know, as we bring this tool to North America and we work with different utility partners, we will work with the utility to go to the state regulator and show that it's a valid method of approach. Again, I've mentioned the validation database a few times, but that's why we put so much emphasis on that validation database, because we want to have the proof to show, like, hey, this is a very good validation method. So.
Do you want me to touch on how we validated it in the UK as well from the trial process?
Yeah, Richard, that would be good, because you were our #1 validation partner.
So the way we did our trials in the first place, we have customer inspection. So we have what we call DSTs, distribution circuit technicians. They'll go out to properties. They will do some visual checks, because sometimes it's very easy to find if it's lead or not. You just look at the pipe, and if it's lead, you know you have to replace it. So when we were using the Mueller technology, it was really good, because we sometimes you'd have a stop tap that had been replaced inside the property, or you'd have a new boundary box outside, so you couldn't tell, but the material in between could still be lead. So obviously we did several trials, and then once those had come back to us, we then built them to have them replaced, and every single one that the device said was lead, as we excavated them, they were lead. So we have 100% record in the validation of the equipment we've used so far, which has been great. Which is essentially why we're going to carry on using it. I think we did a total of 42 in the end. We haven't gone through them all yet, because there has been some delays in some of them, but all the ones that have come back yet, they've been extremely accurate.
Appreciate that addition, Richard.
I do have some spreadsheet data to back that up as well, if anybody wants to see it.
To be published.
Yes.
No, we'll remind everyone that contact information was in the slide deck, and slide decks are in your handout. So please connect with Richard and Dave as you can. But we still have time for questions as well, so we'll touch what we can here. Richard, we did have a question about what your operators actually in the field were experiencing problem-wise, or positive-wise with the sensors. Can you kind of speak to what you've seen in the field?
I mean, the sensor application was super easy, especially in the footway and the public side, should I say, essentially, because you just have to locate a stop tap or a boundary box and just place it on top, as long as you clear the boundary box out very easy. And I say in the UK, a bit different from the States, we do have very restricted movement around the pipes themselves. They'll go into the ground floor. They usually go into kitchens, so they're behind cupboards and things like that. But you only essentially need enough space. If you can get your hand onto the stop tap, then you can get a sensor onto it, even if you have to extend it with a magnetic pipe or something like that, and then clip it on the top, pair of mole grips, that kind of thing. So yeah, the actual application of applying the sensors was easy, even in very restricted spaces.
Dave, anything to add to that?
No, Richard, I think covered it quite well. I know there is one sort of distinct difference in the United States. I think stop taps in the UK are right at ground level, where to access the valve in the United States, it is down below ground level. But one way we connect in the States is use the valve key. So we'll put the valve key down, and you can actually attach the sensor on top of the valve key, and that works very well as a connection point too. So it works. It works on corporation valves in the U.S. as well.
And staying perhaps at the high level, Miharan asks, would you please explain about any public education awareness you have done on the necessity of the lead service replacement? Richard, you touched on that for a moment. Dave, I know you've been involved a bit.
Yeah, so essentially it's hard to get the balance, because you don't want to worry people, essentially, because the way we stop people getting lead poison, essentially, in the UK, we dose it with the pipes with phosphorus, so it creates a nice, if you ever cut it in half, you'll see there's a very tiny white barrier in between that. But obviously you can have the pipes degrade, they can get cut, they can, you can suddenly get a high leaching of lead into certain supply pipes. So you have to bear in mind that when you're telling people we want to replace your lead pipes, they aren't great and we want to replace them with plastic, and essentially plastic will last forever. You know, it'll outlive probably all of us. You know, you can put a 25 mil MDP in, it should last 75 years as long as nobody cuts through it in the future. So the messaging has to be kind of, this is a benefit to you on many other reasons, not just to remove the dangers of lead poisoning. You have to look at, say, you know, you're going to get better flow and water supply, so your pressure could generally increase slightly, although not massively, because that's given by the pressure in the main, but the flow definitely will, especially if you're on joint supplies. You know, if somebody turns a tap on next door and has a shower, it's not going to affect your water supply now. So yeah, messaging has to be soft enough to say, don't worry, but hard enough to say it's definitely worth getting done. So it's a fine balance to be had, and if there's anybody wants some more detail on that, I could put them in touch with our comms team, who are just brilliant at like getting that message at the right level.
Yeah, and if that question was about public outreach, then Richard's answered it. The you know, Mueller's a vendor. We don't really do public outreach. That's on the utility. But if the question was about outreach to utilities and education about utilities, this is a new emerging technology for Mueller, and we're just bringing it to North America, and so that process has just started for us. And one example of our outreach and marketing program would be this AWWA webinar to bring everybody up to speed on what we have.
Right. No, that's true. That is part of the process, and we appreciate you being here. I did want to ask to Richard as well, how did you field validate Mueller's results? I don't know if I had asked you on that high level yet.
Sorry, I thought I covered that on the previous question, but yeah, we essentially, everything we did on a trial, we then excavated them afterwards. So when we did the connections, they were shown to be lead, and that's the results we got back. And then we excavated, replaced, and we found there was lead there, and then replaced them with plastic. I said I do have a spreadsheet detailing, you know, the results that we're getting back, and then when we actually excavated to prove what the results were.
Let's keep going. We have some more time here. I think we have time for 2, maybe even 3 more questions. Let's ask Alexander Kohlberg's question. Does the acoustic tool only identify the pipe between the 2 sensors? Would the acoustic tool be able to indicate any information farther upstream, specifically to the connection to the main? I don't think we had talked about between the sensors yet.
So yes, it is only in between the sensors. We use the terminology in bracket. That's what we sort of call between sensor 1 and sensor 2. And again, it's the majority of the pipeline between those 2 sensors. So we don't see outside the sensors, and we don't see you know, very small pieces of lead like lead goosenecks, for example.
Okay. And the last few minutes as we've been speaking, Scott Snyder asked, if limited pipe is available inside the home, can a valve be used to connect to? I believe that's correct, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, almost any amount of pipe exposed inside the house is good enough. And if it's a valve or a fitting, that is also a valid sensor connection point.
Yeah, just to add to that, in the UK as well, generally they will have the floor, and then the stop tap will just generally be right above it. So we were connecting to like bits of pipe that were probably, you know, 2 or 3 inches long at max sometimes. So yeah.
And I think I should ask this one. It came up a few times in the discussion back to back. Both Paul Wilson and David Egan asked, if a lead service line has been partially repaired with a plastic portion, what will the technology report as the material? Have you run into that yet?
That's a great question, by the way. I have to refer to our database to see if we've actually run into that, but I didn't mention that, you know, one of the classifications is inconclusive. And so there are times when the signal that comes back is not interpretable. I don't know exactly what that scenario would bring, but it might land as an inconclusive result. But again, you know, we're as we develop this, we'll know more in the future.
I can answer that. We did have exactly that scenario where we had
perfect.
at some point there had been a repair from the boundary and the meter onto private. So there was a boundary box there, a meter of plastic, then the remainder of it was all lead. I haven't seen the exact data back myself, but when I was speaking to Joe, your engineer who was coming to do the trials with us, he said it essentially the waveform, I think I'm saying that right, looked like it was slower at the start and then sped up. So he said that, and we actually excavated that particular property and proved there was a meter of plastic that had been repaired previously by our box department, and then the rest of it was lead all the way into the property.
All right, thanks, Richard. Even better than I thought.
Thanks for being on the ground, Richard. We appreciate it. I want to make sure we can fit in one more question since we have the time. You all have submitted so many questions. It is so appreciated. And I will reiterate that they will make their way to our panelists, and hopefully they can connect with you on those. I think, again, another question that came up a few times, and I'll make sure it got fully addressed, is we've just been asked, how does this detect lead gooseneck? That's from Steve O'Connor, some others. So if we have, could we expand, or could you answer to that, please?
Yeah, it does not detect lead goosenecks. This is the pipeline that we're identifying as lead or not lead.
Okay, thank you for making sure we have that clear.
In the UK, would that be the gooseneck? Are you talking from the ferrule and then swept round and then to the start of the service? Is that what you're referring to in the US?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't obviously go backwards from the stop tap.
Yeah.
Although I presume you could probably modify the technology. I won't put words in your mouth to go backwards. You just need to find an asset on the main essentially, then to work out what the material type would be.
I will say potentially, but no promises there. Yeah, so we're right now we're just pipeline material. That's what we're looking at.
That makes sense, but we're expanding, and that's very exciting. So we are getting close to the finish line here, gentlemen. Is there anything, any summary you'd like to give to our audience? Any takeaways you want to make sure that they remember from our presentation today? It is a complicated issue.
Why don't you go first, Richard?
I'm just going to say we've been super happy with the technology. It's proved really reliable. We get great results from it, and we will continue using it into the future. If anybody wants to ask me any more questions, I said we did quite an extensive trial. We did it 2 weeks in March and then 2 weeks in October. So we went for different types of the year as well to make sure the effectiveness of it. We found really good results from the customer because it's 20 minutes in and out. It's completely non-invasive. It doesn't create any hassle essentially for anybody. So yeah, I say we're Severn Trent as a whole. We're really happy with technology, and we are buying more products from Mueller, and we were going to be using them going forward for the rest of our scheme.
Very well said, Richard, and I'll just thank all the attendees for participating. Again, if you're interested, we're taking meetings with utilities today, so please reach out to us at marketing@muellerwp.com or visit us at ACE in the not next week, the week afterwards.
Yes, we are so excited to see so many of you at ACE, and we're excited your questions will be answered there in person. So let me go ahead and start wrapping up. We want to thank everyone who submitted questions. I can't say it enough. We got so many, and it's much appreciated. We're at the end of our time for today, but I'll say one more time, your questions will be shared with our panelists so you can reach out, or they can reach out with more information. And as soon as we end the webinar, window will pop up with a quick survey, and please take a moment to complete the questionnaire. Your feedback is very important to us and helps us improve our webinar programming here at AWWA. And on behalf of AWWA, I want to thank our panel and audience for joining. And until next time, thank you for keeping the water safe and secure.
Thank you.
Thanks all.